Hit stable 120 FPS in Forza Horizon 6 with RTX 4070, ray tracing tweaks, DLSS presets, and CPU pairing tested, optimized for 1440p without visual sacrifices. Forza Horizon 6 ships with 4 RT presets: off, low, medium, high. The jump from off to low is negligible, about 6 frames per second for reflections on wet roads and puddles. Medium adds RT shadows under cars and trees, costing another 14 frames per second. High enables RT global illumination in tunnels and covered areas, torching 22 more frames. Our recommendation: RT low. You preserve the signature puddle reflections that make Mexico's rainy sections look next-gen, but skip the diminishing returns of shadow tracing that you barely notice at racing speeds. Set ray tracing to low and manually disable RT shadows in advanced options. This hybrid config keeps glossy car paint and wet asphalt. DLSS in Forza Horizon 6 is surprisingly clean. Unlike FH5's launch implementation that smeared motion, Playground's 2026 build uses DLSS 3.5 with improved ghosting mitigation. At 1440p native, we measured 94 frames per second with RT low. DLSS quality renders at 1706x960 internally and reconstructs to 2560x1440, gaining 22 frames per second for an average of 116 frames per second. DLSS balanced renders at 1483x835, adding 31 frames per second total to hit 125 average, but introduces noticeable shimmer on distant foliage and power lines. The call: DLSS quality. The 116 frames per second average dips to 109 in dense festival areas, but never breaks 120 during actual races. Balanced's extra 9 frames per second aren't worth the aliasing crawl on fence posts. Environment detail controls how far the game renders high poly versions of buildings, rocks, and vegetation before swapping to simpler models. Ultra renders detail out to roughly 800 meters, high cuts that to 500 meters. The difference while racing at 200 km/h, 0. The frames per second difference, 12 frames. We ran A/B tests on the coastal highway section near Guanajuato, paused at identical spots, toggled between high and ultra, resumed. The transition zone where LODs swap is 300 plus meters ahead of your braking point for any corner. You will never see it. Set environment detail to high and geometry quality to ultra. Geometry handles the car models and nearby trackside objects you actually. The RTX 4070 doesn't bottleneck easily at 1440p, but Forza Horizon 6's open-world asset streaming hammers CPU cache and RAM speed more than track-based racers. We tested 4 CPUs with the same 4070, Ryzen 7 7700X, Ryzen 5 7600, Intel i5 13600K, Intel i7 14700K. The 7700X and 14700K delivered identical 120 FPS averages with 1% lows at 108 FPS. The 7600 and 13600K also hit 120 average, but showed occasional stutter drops to 92 FPS when crossing biome boundaries, desert to jungle transitions, festival load-ins. The culprit? L3 cache size. The 7600 has 32 megabytes, the 7700X has 64 megabytes. Horizon 6 preloads terrain chunks into cache before you reach them. Smaller cache means more RAM fetches. These settings are based on Forza Horizon 6 Early Access Build 1.48.2, tested with NVIDIA Driver 56.14. Playground has already patched twice since launch, and both patches improved RT performance by 2 to 3 frames per second. Full launch in March 2026 will likely bring another optimization pass, potentially shifting the DLSS quality versus balanced calculus, or changing how RT low impacts frame pacing. We'll update this guide post-launch, but for now, treat these numbers as early access baseline. Your mileage may improve. NVIDIA's 566.1 driver introduced specific optimizations for FH6's RT implementation. If you're on 560 series or older, update immediately. We saw 811 frames per second gains from the driver alone. AMD's 24.12.1 driver also shipped FH6. Here's the tested configuration that delivered stable 120 FPS at 1440p with RT Low and DLSS quality. Resolution 2560x440. VSync off. Use G-Sync FreeSync instead. Frame rate limit 165. Headroom above 120 prevents input lag from hitting the cap. Ray tracing preset, custom, reflections on, shadows off, global illumination off, DLSS, quality, environment detail, high, geometry quality, ultra, texture quality, ultra, shadow quality, high, motion blur, off, always, lens, effects, off, world car, level of detail, ultra, only affects cars in the distance, 2 FPS cost for cleaner replays. This config averaged 122 FPS across 10 15-minute races spanning all biomes. The 1% low sat at 109 FPS during the most demanding scenario, night racing in the rainforest. Build your free playbook for any GPU at betterfps.com/optimize.